Magnets. We have a very hot topic tonight, a dangerous topic, you guys. This is the kind of stuff that you really can't just talk to just anybody about, okay? And I love to talk about these kind of topics on my channel because I like to provide, it is my goal to provide a safe space to talk about any topic, okay? So tonight we are talking about healing the mother wound, adult daughters of narcissistic mothers. Okay, healing the mother wound, adult daughters of narcissistic mothers. And the reason I say this is a dangerous topic, a hot topic, is because expressing any type of, dissatisfaction, any type of, wound or pain or around the shortcomings of your mother is very taboo in most cultures. Okay, in most cultures, including American society. Okay, it is very hush hush. You can easily look like, a bad person or the bad child, an ungrateful child, if you dare speak of anything um, against your mother. But the reality is, greetings, Denotria. Greetings. I just realized who's on my screen. Please say hello, you guys, as you come into the room. Greetings, Zena. Greetings, Dabney. Hola. It's very taboo, you guys, to speak, to speak out against your mother, even when your mother is dead wrong. Okay? Even if your mom is dead wrong, you can look like the bad guy speaking the truth about your experience of your mother. Okay? But like I said, this is a safe space here. And we're going to talk about this in a way that is loving to the self. Okay? Loving to the self. So if you grew up with a mom or any parent, either parent that had very strong narcissistic tendencies, you will find this episode to be helpful. Okay, so guys, we're not here to we can't like diagnose anybody as being a narcissist, but we're going to talk about what narcissistic tendencies look like, especially coming from a parent. Okay, coming from a mother, from this perspective. All right, and this is really specific because there are specific ways narcissism can look coming from a mother, and the mother and child bond is a very influential bond. It's a very important bond in your life. It very much shapes you as you come into your early childhood, your teenage years, and even well into adulthood. If you had a mother with narcissistic tendencies, this is something that can haunt you, that can keep you triggered, that can affect your ability to form healthy relationships of all kinds throughout your adulthood if you're not very intentional with recognizing, first of all, telling yourself the truth about the type of injury that this is. Okay. And, doing some healing work, doing some clearing, believing and giving credence to your own experience. Okay. And the reason I'm really like harping on believing your experience and telling yourself the truth about your experience is because one of the things that narcissists are known for is gaslighting. Okay. Making you believe that you are making this up, that you're the crazy one, and that, anything that you're expressing, to the contrary, or, speaking up about their behavior, calling them out about their behavior. Narcissists do not take accountability for their actions. Okay. They will essentially play in your face. Okay. As the saying goes. All right. So, that the relationship with your mother is representative of your relationship to the creator. Okay. On a spiritual level, energetically, the relationship with your mother is a representation of your relationship with the creator. Okay. And most often, your mother's face is the first face that you see. You're first held by your mother. The first voice that you hear is your mother's voice, because you can hear your mother's voice inside the womb. And it's supposed to be a place of great safety. In an ideal situation, you should only associate feelings of safety and nurturing and love with your mother. But in many, many cases, that is not it. That is not what happens. Why is that? Why is that? Because it is a great myth that becoming a mother automatically changes who you are. Okay? That's a myth. All right? It's a myth that when a woman first sees her baby, she automatically, no matter what, is going to fall in love with this baby and become this baby's greatest, protector, is automatically going to bond with the child and be willing to put, her life on the line and sacrifice everything about herself for the baby. That is not a guarantee, you guys, okay? And not even to say, I'm not even reinforcing the idea that sacrificing everything about yourself is a healthy model of motherhood. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you what the myth is, what the societal beliefs are, okay? Those things are not true, okay? So, what I want to say about it is this. If you grew up with a mother that seemed to always be working against you in various ways, I can guarantee you that this is affecting your ability to form healthy bonds with people. I can guarantee you that if you don't address this, it's also going to cause you to draw other narcissists into your life. Okay? And you're going to struggle with interpersonal relationships. You're going to struggle with your self-esteem and with showing love to yourself. Okay? So let's get into this a little more deeply. Let's talk about what narcissism looks like. Okay? And the ways in which this can happen specifically in the mother and child or mother-daughter relationship. Okay? And if you're a guy, don't tune out. Don't tune out just because we're talking about the mother-daughter relationship. Because especially if you are dating women, or have friendships or relationships with women that you are supporting in your life, it's important to be able to recognize if the woman that you are in a relationship with or otherwise supporting in your life, if she has this particular injury. Okay, because you will find that she may have a very unhealthy attachment style. Okay. So let's look at this a little further. Okay. What are some very key, we don't have time to go through all of the symptoms, but what are some very key, very common symptoms of narcissism? And if this is already making sense to you guys, if this is touching some buttons or you're interested in hearing more, give me some hearts in the chat if this is already making sense to you, already piquing your interest, or if you think you may, if you're listening, if you're wondering, I wonder if I'm about to learn that my mother had some narcissistic tendencies, okay? And you guys, I hate to make, I do want to say I'm not making light of it, because it is a very painful experience, very painful experience. And we're going to talk about why, okay? But it's very difficult to find outlets to be able to talk about it, because people will shame you for saying that, you felt, a great sadness or some type of inefficiency in your mother's parenting style. Okay, you can be made out to be the bad guy. And I have quite a few people in my life who have lost their mothers, and I don't feel like it's a safe place to talk to those particular people, because a lot of times people have the attitude, well, at least your mother's still here, It's like, I get that, but if your mother is working against you, or is displaying narcissistic tendencies, That's a real thing. And you need to have a safe place to talk about that. Okay, so what does narcissism look like in a mom? Okay, and I'm a mom myself, so I'm not here to, bash anybody's mother, including my own. And I was very, in raising my own children, I will say that I was aware, the characteristics that I was aware of that that may have been learned behaviors for myself. I was conscious of not displaying those same characteristics. But I must say that the more that I learn, the more that I understand, the more that my consciousness rises and opens up, I can see where I may have at times said things or not been aware of things that may have been hurtful for my children. So even though my children are now adults, I still go back to them and say, because sometimes I have these moments of realization and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. When you were a kid, I did XYZ or I said XYZ. And though you may not realize it yet, I realized that that was insensitive or that was not helpful to you at the time. And I want to apologize. And if later you ever need to talk about that, I'm here for it. Okay. We're going to talk about more what sincere apologies sound like. Okay. But that's important to know. Okay. That's an important acknowledgement to make. Okay. There aren't any perfect mothers. Okay. But I also want to say to you, if you're a mom and you hear something in this description I'm about to give that you're like, oh man, I may have did that, to my kid. All you can do at this point is go back and apologize, acknowledge it, allow them to tell you how it affected them, and be careful not to continue that behavior again. Okay. But I'm just gonna list some general behaviors that occur with narcissistic tendencies in mothers. Okay. So gaslighting, right? I think we're all familiar with gaslighting. This is when someone makes you feel like, they're doing something to you. They're doing something that is, harmful, that is rude, that is insensitive or whatever. When you bring it to their attention, they're acting like, no, I'm not doing that. What are you talking about? You're crazy, right? You're the crazy one, right? Gaslighting. All right. And when it's a mom doing this, a lot of times it's just, oh, don't question me. I'm your mother. You're just being a disrespectful child at this point, right? You're just being a disrespectful daughter at this point, even if you're an adult daughter at this point. Okay. The silent treatment is a big one. I'm not speaking to you, as a form of punishment or as a way of manipulating you into acting the way that she wants you to act. Okay. The silent treatment, if you had a mom with narcissistic tendencies, this is probably really familiar to you. Okay. But for some people, this may sound really foreign, like, what? You got the silent treatment from your mom? Yeah. Imagine that. The silent treatment. That's a big one. Okay. So if you're wondering, was my mom just, hard on me, or was she actually narcissistic? That's a big one. Okay. Check that off on your list. All right. Love bombing. Okay. Now, typically we hear about love bombing in the context of romantic relationships. Okay. But a narcissistic mom can also love bomb their child. Okay. And this could be being really, super nice and giving you, accolades, giving you encouragement, giving you, support, loving, giving you affection, for the purposes of manipulating you into doing something that they want you to do. Okay. To get you to display a certain behavior that they want you to display. This could be a reward for your silence when you didn't speak up. This could even be something that they're doing to make the other parent look bad. This could be love bombing after, having neglected some responsibility. If they left you somewhere, or they didn't, make sure that you ate. They left you with a grandparent. They didn't show up for you in some way. Then they turn around and love bomb you. Okay. All of a sudden, oh, you're just, now Now they're turning around and being really kind, okay? And it could be to make up for something mess up that they did, something harmful, something hurtful, or it could be a setup because they're about to ask you for something. They're about to, try to convince you to do something. And this is especially a common tactic once you become an adult and they have lost the ability to force you or, command you to do things because now you have freedom of choice. So it may be something that they've always done, or this may be a new tactic that they use because they can no longer tell you what to do or force you to do things, but they're going to try to love bomb you. Now all of a sudden I want to watch the kids for you. All of a sudden, I want to, send you money or, tell you what a great mom you are or how proud I am of you. This can even be a thing where your mom is trying to convince you of this narrative that they have that, your growing up years were so great and that you guys are so close and that your, mother-daughter bond is just so perfect and right. And you're like, that's not the way I remember things. I don't remember that. Those are your memories. Those are your manufactured memories. That's not how the relationship felt to me. I felt bullied. Right? That's a form of love bombing too, or a form of gaslighting, I would say, even kind of a mixture there, right? Just pretending that, oh, we're just so perfect little mother and daughter. No, we're not. That's not real, right? You may find yourself in a situation where they're trying to convince you that your childhood was oh so awesome, so perfect, when it actually wasn't. Invalidating your thoughts and feelings, right? So when you express that, hey, I feel like this thing you do to me or that thing you do to me is not fair, or you try to speak up about something, nothing that you say or none of your feelings are validated. They're not worthy of being heard. You're told you shouldn't feel that way, or you're wrong for feeling that way, or you're just being sensitive, you're just making things up. You're just being a spoiled brat, or you've always been ungrateful. Those types of things, guilting you, guilt trips is a big one. It's a big one. Oh, I've sacrificed this and that for you. I gave up this and that, for you to have a good childhood. And this one, you guys, I'm going to tell you, I caught myself saying this to my son when he was really young. And I had to stop myself and correct myself and say, you know what? These were my choices. That's not your fault. I want you to make good decisions because that's what's good for your life. Okay? Me deciding to become a parent, when I decided to become a parent, is not something that you asked for. Okay? And I really was just repeating something that I had heard in a rant in my childhood. And I had to catch myself and stop myself from repeating that cycle. But I can remember the moment when I realized, ooh, I shouldn't say that. I should never say that. That's not okay. You shouldn't say that. But sometimes there are behaviors that are passed on and we find ourselves handling a situation the same way our parent would have handled it. And then if you catch yourself and admit that you're wrong, apologize and move on. Okay? Move on to a better behavior, I should say. Okay? Another thing could be competitiveness. Okay? Sometimes a narcissistic mother, this is very common, will be competitive with her daughter. Okay? God forbid the daughter is pretty in a way the mom used to be pretty, or is pretty in some way that the mother wished that she were pretty. If the daughter is, reaching the age where she's starting to get attention from guys, if the daughter is smart or confident in some way that the mother is not, if the daughter is finding success in her life in some area that the mother did not find success, it can be very triggering for a narcissistic mother to see their daughter reaching success in that area of their life. And they may trying to make her feel bad about it, try to interfere with that success. Greetings, Diggy Mo. Hi from New York. Greetings. Thank you for joining. A narcissistic mother will not be able to congratulate you on your success or be happy for you. They may, just like totally shut down when you report that something good is happening for your life. They are threatened by your happiness, threatened by your success. They're offended, that you are not that you are not failing without them, without their support, and that you are finding yourself, that you're living your life and reaching for your own happiness despite their lack of support for you. Okay? This is very, very common. They may be competitive with you in various ways. It could be looks, it could be support, it could be attention, it could be a lot of different things, but there'll be a competitiveness, a petty jealousy. Okay? There will also, another sign is, this is one that goes under the radar a lot of times. Helping or rescuing you when you're in a bad situation as a means of control. Okay? Doing things for you that on the surface are nice, but they're really doing this to have some strings to pull with you, to have something to hold over your head later, to have something to throw back in your face, right? Or treating you like you need rescuing because it keeps them in, like, with the upper hand, right? If any of this is sounding familiar to you, if you're having some aha moments, give me some fire in the chat. Give me some fire in the chat. If you've experienced this, or if you have witnessed this, you witnessed someone experiencing this, okay? And this one is really, really common among, if you're an adult now, 30s and 40s, maybe even 20s. This is really common with the generation before us and the generation before that, okay? These things are really, really common because for women who were mothers and grandmothers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, greetings, Blue Lotus, generations before us, the women did not have a certain type of agency or control over their own lives. And women were much more highly encouraged to use manipulation as a tactic in order to get what they wanted, because they did not have the freedoms that we have now as women. They weren't able to work and support themselves and make their own money, and were often being controlled in their own lives. They weren't able to speak up. It was considered, unladylike, or unattractive for a woman to speak her mind. So, not having authentic power, right? Not being rooted and grounded in your authentic power was not uncommon for a woman. Okay? And many women were trained by their mothers and their aunties and their grandmothers to use manipulation tactics, to use guilt. Okay? And in order to get what they wanted, because they did not have power, agency, and control over their own lives. If that makes sense, give me some fire in the chat. Give me some fire in the chat, right? There's all these, sayings that are passed down through generations of women about always being nice and being sweet, and pretty is as pretty does. You catch more flies with honey, and things of that nature. But yeah, it's true. You should be kind if you can, when being kind is appropriate, right? But being kind to someone, or over giving, playing favorites, and things of that nature, pretending to be childlike, pretending to be helpless in order to get what you want, it's no longer necessary. It's no longer necessary. And my heart goes out. I definitely have compassion for generations and generations of women who suffered and not having control and having agency over their life. But that's not the case anymore today. It's way easier to stand in your authentic power and rooted and grounded in your sense of self as a woman today than it ever has been, right? But many of our mothers were just taught these behaviors and had a lot of repressed anger and hurt because of what it meant to be a woman in the era that they grew up in. Okay. You know, we think about, all the generations and generations of women who were housewives and, were never allowed to work outside the home, were not ever able to pursue their goals and dreams. They had just as many goals and dreams and gifts and talents as we did, but they weren't free to express or to pursue those things, right? Greetings, Elmira. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. Yes, Amara said this is so true. Absolutely. More tactics. We talked about, manipulation, right? Lies. Manipulation can look so many different ways. It can be, massaging information, withholding information. It can be straight up lying, right? It can be the other things we talked about, the gaslighting, the silent treatment, the love bombing, all of those type of things that we've already mentioned. A huge one is triangulation. Triangulation is a huge game, a very common game that narcissists play. And triangulation is, like, for instance, say me, Zena, and Elmira are friends, and we actually all do happen to know each other. I'm just pulling from the bottom of the list of my guests here in the chat. Me, Elmira, and Zena all know each other, right? But if I am a narcissist and I, have a habit of triangulating, one thing I may do is tell Elmira something about Zena to make her look at Zena kind of funny, like, what? You did what? I don't know if I want to hang out with you anymore. And then go tell Zena something weird about Elmira, right? And make Zena think, what? Elmira's on that? Elmira's moving like that? That's the kind of person I want to be associated with, right? So as the narcissist, I now play the middle and, buddy up with Elmira when Zena's not around. And when Elmira's not around, I'm buddying up with Zena. But I'm pulling all the strings by picking and choosing what information I share, maybe even fabricating information to share. Mothers sometimes do this with children. They may do this to you amongst you and your siblings, gossiping, saying things. Well, you know how your sister is. She's always been rude. She's always been ungrateful. She's always been a brat. She's always been spoiled. And then turn around and say to your sister about you, well, you know how Elmira is. She's always been rude. She's always thought she's better than everybody. That's why you're my favorite. Moms can do stuff like that, Terrible, isn't it? But it keeps up discord. It damages bonds between the two people who are being triangulated against each other, and it keeps the person at the pinnacle of the triangle. It keeps them in control. It keeps them moving the chess pieces, okay? And this may be kind of triggering some memories for you guys, some realizations for you guys. Yeah, that's sad, but those things can be said by certain mothers, as Elmira says in the chat. Yes, it's so true. Unfortunately, playing favorites is like a big thing. It's a big thing. And when I hear a lot of stories from, it happens now, but it was very, very common, like amongst our grandparents' era. If you had, 10 kids and only 3 or 4 of them were helpful around the house, and you really needed that help around the house, it could be really tempting to play favorites, right? Okay, now, this could also be playing favorites or triangulating between you and your children. A narcissistic mom may do things to undermine your parenting, right? And get in between you and your children, make themselves a wedge between you and your kids. right? That's very non-supportive, very manipulating. They also may do things to get in between you and your spouse, right? And this is even more common, like if your mom is not married or is unhappy in her marriage, she may meddle in yours. Okay, that is a narcissistic tendency. Okay, it goes deeper than, oh, she's just nosy or she's just worrisome. Start to think about, man, is there a pattern? Am I recognizing more than one, more than two, more than three of these characteristics that we're talking about? Maybe hitting on something for you. Okay, another thing that narcissistic moms do is try to make your friends their friends. Okay, that can be one of the signs and symptoms too. You know, wanting to be close with the people that you're close to, wanting to get their claws in the people that you are close to. That is also a form of control. And they a lot of times do this by pretending to be super mom or pretending to be also nurturing, where you know better, right? But they're wanting to reach out and be close to and form bonds with people that you have bonds with. That is a means of control. Okay. Um, projecting, accusing you of being the one that's exhibiting these characteristics that they're exhibiting. You're the gaslighter, you're the manipulator, you're the liar, right? You're the jealous one, you're the petty one. Projecting, accusing you of doing things that they are actually doing or holding feelings that they actually hold. Sometimes, narcissists will use the guilt trip like, oh, you just don't like me. You've always hated me. And you're thinking, really? I've hated you since I was 3. I don't know about that, Ma. I've always been the manipulator, huh? Okay. Withholding information, that's part of manipulation. I think I mentioned that already. Refusal to acknowledge your talents, your spiritual gifts, or your success in life. Okay. This is a huge one. Refusing to acknowledge your talents. This probably started when you were growing up. Okay. Give me some fire in the chat if that sounds familiar. Refusing to acknowledge or support, or help you discover these things, because that is a big part of being a parent, encouraging you to do the things that you're good at, encouraging you to explore the things that you are uniquely talented in, right? Things that you show the word is slipping my mind, but that you show that you have a higher competency in, right? An affinity for. Encouraging you to do those things is an important part of being a parent, but a narcissistic mother will withhold that from you or even tell you that that's silly. You'll never make any money at that, right? Diggy Mo says, yeah, preaching the truth, right? It's so true. If you have spiritual gifts, especially if you have a mother that is like steeped in religion, they may tell you, oh, that's evil, that's bad, you shouldn't do that. A lot of times kids are discovering that that they have psychic abilities, or that they can see spirits, they see dead people, as the saying goes, or that they have, certain knowings, that they have healing abilities, that they have these gifts as a child. And as a child, you may speak this not knowing that that's taboo, but you quickly learn from your narcissistic mother that, no, that's not encouraged, right? And for those who are experiencing this, whether it's a talent or a spiritual gift, like maybe when I say talent, like maybe you could sing, maybe you could dance, maybe you could draw, maybe you could write, maybe you always wanted to be a model or something like that, right? You photograph very well, or whatever the case may be. You're really smart, or have a great ability. If your parent, check this out, if your mom, right, and tonight we're just talking about moms, I think the same thing could be true of dads, had that same gift or that same ability, and it got squelched in them when they were a child, they never pursued it, or they pursued it but were unsuccessful, they can try to dim your light. It can be coming from a place of unfulfilled desire for them. Or perhaps they had gifts that they were, encouraged to suppress. Because the further we go back in the generations, the more these things were considered taboo, right? Especially if your parents were raised in the church, okay? Or maybe some other religion that was like not accepting of spiritual gifts, okay? So consider that. Is there a possibility that your parent or your mom is poo-pooing on your talent or your spiritual gifts? You're just, your happy, joyful demeanor, because they had that light in them at one point in time, but it got crushed by their parents or someone else in their environment. Okay. Sometimes we don't stop and we don't conceptualize the fact that our parents were once children too. Many of these behaviors were learned. Okay. Refusal to support your goals or only does so conditionally. They're only supportive of you under certain conditions when you act a certain way, or if they want something from you, or something of that nature. Yes, Digimo says that's why kids love to walk barefoot. They can still feel the earth's energy. So true. So true. And a lot of times, a parent can say something like, oh, don't do that. That's not safe, and they'll put their fear on you, right? They push their fears off on you. And it may be true depending on where you live. It may not be safe to walk outside, but what you can do is say, hey, let me take you to the park or to the beach or somewhere where it is safe so that you can explore the feeling of walking barefoot. Okay, that's just a small example, but that's a very good example. Okay. Yes, very, very common in younger kids. Yes. And a lot of times parents are pushing their fears off on you. Absolutely. Now, a last thing I'm going to mention is being hypercritical. Okay. A lot of us grew up with a parent, namely a mother, that was hypercritical. Okay. And if that is the case, it can affect you so deeply that you can grow up with hearing that voice, that constant criticism. And it can be a voice that plays in your head when that parent is nowhere around. And you begin to mistake it for your own voice. You begin to criticize yourself. There came a time in my life where I had to ask myself, whose voice is that? Who is this constant critic in my head? And I literally said to myself out loud, who is that? So that the answer could come to me very clear, and it did. But you have to learn to undo that, to stop that hypercritical voice. When you grow up with someone in your home, especially a parent that is always criticizing you, you begin to criticize yourself and constantly second guess yourself. Give me some fire in the chat if that makes sense to you. If any of this sounds familiar, if you experience this yourself, or if you know someone who experienced this and you can see how it's affecting their life. If you have more examples, you can put that in the chat for me. Give me some more examples of narcissistic behaviors that are common in mothers. And this is very appropriate. We just had Mother's Day a Sunday or two ago, right? And for some people, Mother's Day is actually very painful because you're encouraged to celebrate someone that does not celebrate you. But you're the bad one. You're a bad daughter or son if you are unable to wholeheartedly celebrate your mother. Many of us struggle on those days. It's a 50-50 kind of day. Yeah, I'm glad somebody pushed me out. But what they did next. All right. That's how it feels for some people. Like, what came next was not cool. When my mother was done carrying me, she was done carrying me. Right? That's how it feels for some people, and it's very real. There aren't that many safe spaces to express this. So this channel is one. Okay, thank you so much for the support in the chat. Now, what does this do to you? We've already talked about a lot of repercussions, a lot of results of experiencing this in childhood. But another thing that this can cause for you is something called ambiguous loss, which we have talked about on this channel before. Ambiguous loss is when you lose someone, but they're still here. Okay, that's an example of ambiguous loss, when you lose something or someone, but they're actually physically still here. Okay, so this can happen in a sense, and I talked about this from a personal perspective when I talked about it in another video, when I was saying that when my parents divorced, my relationship with my mother really changed. The way that my mother treated me really changed. The way that my mother's whole personality changed, actually. She became someone I didn't really recognize anymore, right? So she was here, but the connection that we had was lost, and that was very difficult to process as a child. Okay. Another example of losing someone but not losing someone is if a loved one or maybe your spouse is deployed, right? They're gone. They're not gone, but they're gone. Right? It's like it's a huge feeling of loss, even though they're still in your life. If someone is incarcerated, if someone gets kidnapped, it's maybe a little bit more rare, but it's like you've lost them, but there's a very difficult time processing that grief because either they're still here or you don't know where they are. Okay, you don't understand what happened. Diggy Mo says, always comparing you to someone else's children. Yes. Or even comparing you to a sibling, right? Comparing you to somebody else's kids. Why can't you be like so-and-so's kids down the street? They're so bright. They're so handsome. They're so obedient, right? Or why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be like your sister? They're always like this or like that. That's not helpful. That is not helpful. You are who you are, and you deserve to be appreciated for who you are, for your good qualities. Yes, right, exactly. Want you to be like another child. Exactly. So, there's ambiguous loss. That's one feeling that this causes when you have a narcissistic mother. It's like a sense that something's missing in that relationship, even though the person is right here. It's like you're here, but you're not here for me, right? Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you're expected to, like a set of facts is presented to you, but it's not true, and you're expected to like behave in accordance with this set of facts, but it's very difficult to do so because you know this to be false. So if you had a type of mother, let's say mother in this case, it can happen with any parent, but a mom that, to the rest of the world, she was awesome, great, local, hero, really active and wonderful at church, really active and wonderful, celebrating her workplace or in the community or whatever, outside of the home, very warm, very loving, very nurturing. But when y'all are at home and it's just y'all, she's a totally different person, right? And from other people, you always say, oh, your mom's so wonderful. You're so lucky to have a mom like her. She's so this, she's so that. She's very charismatic and warm and loving and nurturing outside of the home to other people. But with you, she's cold or neglectful or abusive. You are experiencing your mother in a different way. It can make you feel like your mom, maybe she doesn't like you. Maybe she just don't like you. You're not worthy of what she showers, the type of attention or affection that she showers on other people. And it could be people outside the home, or it could be other children, your siblings in the home, or you're as an adult now, other siblings in your family that play the little games with her and will never call her out on her crap. Right? So this creates cognitive dissonance. It's like, I'm expected to act this way or go along with this, what's being presented, but I know that's not true. That's cognitive dissonance. Okay. Another thing you may experience, especially if you're a star seed, is soul dissonance. Okay, this scenario of having this mother, a mother figure, a parental figure that is pulling you in a direction that you know is not good for your soul, it's not, leading you to into the full expression of your soul. This is soul dissonance. Okay, this is like my parents or maybe even my whole family feels foreign to me. This does not feel like these people do not feel like mates or matches to my soul, who I am inside. But in order to function in this family and be a favored person in this family, I'm supposed to act this way. I'm supposed to try to fit in. But this does not agree with my soul. I know something inside of me is telling me, all this arguing, the bickering, the pettiness, the favoritism, the manipulation, something's not right about this. It doesn't have to be this way. Why are we behaving this way? Why are we going along with this? Right? I know this is not going to lead me to the peace that my soul wants. This is not, an aid to my soul's mission. You can know that at a very young age. You may not have those words, but you can feel very out of place within your family. Just because you're born into that family doesn't mean you fit into that family. They may feel like strangers to you. This is soul dissonance. Okay, it's a form of soul dissonance. Okay, it can be one of the definitions of soul dissonance. That may be a new term for many of us. Okay, yep, stranger danger. Yep, that's right. Okay, so thank y'all for the support in the chat. I know this is gonna hit for y'all. It's a very common experience among starseeds, among healers. Okay, among people who are empaths. You can be born into a family or find yourself in many different situations that you're like, I do not belong here. These people do not think like I think. I know we're all born in the same place. We all came out of the same womb, but y'all don't feel like family to me. Okay? Feels like stranger danger, as Zena says, right? So, there's also, in addition to all this, you're also forced to process the actual damage of feeling emotionally unsafe around a parent. Okay. Now, this is an example of root chakra injury. Okay. Feeling unsafe, even though it's emotionally unsafe, that shadows or foreshadows being physically unsafe. Okay. So, having a sense of belonging, our need for a sense of belonging is directly related to the root chakra. Okay. I love to give you guys, the corresponding chakras when we're talking about these traumas. So that's number one that I'm going to mention is the root chakra damage. Okay. That's also something to process. So there's the damage of feeling unsafe emotionally, having a parent, a mom working against you, insulting you, digging away at your self-esteem or your sense of self, making it very difficult for you to form a sense of your own identity outside of her identity. There may not be, she may go on rants or rages that, leave no room for your emotion in the home, right? There's no room for anybody's emotions but hers in the home, right? It's very difficult to form a sense of self with that going on, okay? So there's also solar plexus injury, solar plexus chakra injury, okay? That deals with your sense of self, your sense of identity, your ability to individuate, right? And not be overshadowed by someone else's personality, their identity, right? Thank you, Zena, for that encouragement. Give this video a like if you're enjoying this conversation, if you're learning something or if you're relating to it, okay? Also, there's also, in addition to that, in addition to the actual damage of feeling emotionally unsafe around a parent, there's also the absence of the guidance that you actually needed from your mother. If this makes you feel disconnected from your ancestral lineage, right? There's certain guidance, certain information that should be passed down from a mother or even from your dad, from any parents. It just so happens we're talking about mothers tonight, right? But that connection to your lineage, that emotional connection, can be broken if there's not a grandmother or aunt, someone else around, another feminine character in your family that does embrace you. It can make you feel very lost in the world. Like, you don't have anyone to emulate. Or if you're a man, you don't have a way of understanding women, in close relation to you if you don't have a strong bond with your mother. So there's that ancestral connection that's broken, right? The passing down of the wisdom and the culture. Okay? And our ancestral connections are directly related to our sacral chakra. Okay? So this is big sacral chakra injury. Okay? Causes huge sacral chakra blockages. Okay? So another reason that this is related to your sacral chakra is because it really damages your ability to learn to set boundaries with people. Okay? When you're being emotionally or psychologically, physically, God forbid, sexually violated by your mother, this really weakens your ability to draw boundaries, to learn to protect yourself in any way. Okay? So you're kind of set out into the world without real ways to protect yourself. So you're kind of just thrown out to the wolves. And you shouldn't have to protect yourself from your mother, but a child is particularly defenseless against their mother. And like I said, it doesn't matter what type of abuse it is, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual. You shouldn't have to protect yourself against your mother. But when you are left helpless, defenseless, in the hands of a mother that is in any way abusive, you really have a degraded ability to defend yourself, to draw boundaries, to learn to protect yourself. Okay? So that is sacral chakra damage. Okay? So why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this tonight, Pangea? Let's go there. Okay, why in the world are we talking about this? A lot of healers and people on YouTube are talking about the rise in consciousness, the great awakening, the flash of light, and all of these things, these wonderful things that are happening. Those things are happening. Great. Right? We're getting all these wonderful solar flares and all these beautiful frequencies from the sun that are putting us on, right? That is wonderful. There is a huge spiritual awakening happening. And that is why we're talking about this, okay? Because what I want everyone to realize is that because of all of the beautiful frequencies, the solar flares, and all the light codes that we're receiving right now, and these says because the world needs to hear this, correct? Because of this huge awakening that's happening, these light codes are hitting everybody, even the narcissists, okay? So you may begin to notice some level of awakening even in people in your life that have always been a problem. People are rising in consciousness from whatever level they are at currently, where they were previously existing. Okay? So I don't like to use, lower and higher and, comparison type of language, but just for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to use that. Okay? So someone who was previously working from a lower level of consciousness, displaying these type of characteristics that we're talking about, they can experience some healing. You may notice that they're experiencing some sort of opening, some sort of awakening, right? And that's wonderful. It's great to celebrate. It's a beautiful thing to see, right? If you've done your healing work, then it is a beautiful thing to see. If you're still resentful about it, you may not want to see them wake up. You may want to see them suffer and get left behind. So clock that T within yourself. Okay, that could be a thing. If it's happening inside of you, check it, pray about it, work on clearing that, right? Because we should be able to be, happy for our family members or, people that we know that are experiencing some rise in consciousness, even if they've been horrible to us all of our lives, right? But I'm having this conversation to also caution you, okay? That even though these dark figures, these dark characters in your life may experience some awakening, I want to caution you to not just automatically let all your guards down. I don't want you to just drop these defenses that you have worked so hard to develop, these boundaries that you worked so hard to develop and hold on to for your own self-protection. Because just because a person has some level of awakening, some level of a rise in consciousness, if they have not been very intentional to work on these specific issues and they're just kind of having this rise in consciousness by default because, they were in the sun at the right time. Maybe a lot of y'all know what I'm talking about. If you know, you know. But just because they happen to be here on the planet, on the same planet that you're on at the same time, just like we're getting upgrades, they're getting upgrades too. But that doesn't mean they're cured. Ooh. Ooh. It doesn't mean they're cured. There's a difference in doing some changing and some healing and being cured. Okay? It's those of us who've been, intentional on our healing journey for a long time, we still may not be cured. We're learning the same lessons over and over at a higher and higher level, which we've talked about before, right? We've talked about this on this channel before. You're not going in circles, you're growing in spirals, right? You're not going in circles, you're growing in spirals because you may be learning the same lessons over and over again at a higher and higher level. So you may be dealing with old stuff, and especially with recent planetary transits, we've been presented with some old tests, some old issues. We've been represented with some old issues recently. If you're really paying attention, you've likely noticed that recently some issues may have come up for you that you may have thought you were over, that you may have thought you were cured from, right? But even the person who's the most intentional on their journey may never be cured. So do you think that someone who's kind of getting some upgrades by default or kind of taking a stab at it, that they're really cured? No, what you're witnessing is a slight rise in consciousness. It might be a great rise in consciousness. It might be a slight opening or a great opening, but that doesn't mean that this person is cured, okay? And what will happen is in a squeeze or a pinch, if that person is uncomfortable or they're confronted with something, and today we're talking about narcissistic mothers. So if your narcissistic mother has her back against the wall and she's not being intentional in her journey, or she just is not intentional about this particular issue, say we're talking about the habit of manipulation, lying or gaslighting, when her back is against the wall, what's going to happen? She's going to default to that same behavior that has been very painful for you in the past. Okay? So I'm not asking you to be unforgiving. Let's be clear. I'm not asking you to stay mad. I'm not asking you to stay hurt. I'm not asking you to stay resentful. What I'm asking you to do is stay observative. Stay woke. Stay woke. Okay, pay attention. Observe over a long period of time. And it's okay to continue to hold to your boundaries that have kept you emotionally safe in the past, right? Because many of us are still learning how to do that. Thank you, Diggy Mo. I really appreciate you for watching the show. Diggy Mo says, I really appreciate your show. I really appreciate y'all coming on here and having these conversations with me. Give me some fire in the chat if this makes sense to you. Give me some examples of this, if there are examples coming to mind for you. But people have operated the same way all their life. You know, if your mother is 70 and she's been a narcissist, you know, all her life, she's been a manipulator since she was 7. Do you think that just because, you know, she's, you know, opening her mind a little bit more, just because there are more frequencies of freedom in the air these days, do you think she's really not going to revert to some form of manipulation when her back is against the wall? Just out of habit, just on autopilot. Yes, yes. Without being very intentional on this journey, people still are who they are. Okay? And I'm not saying people can't change. I'm just saying, watch and see if they really did change. And my point is that people who really do hold your best interest in mind, they don't have a problem with you doing things to protect yourself. They're not trying to push past or force their way past your boundaries, the things that make you feel safe. They're going to respect those things. And if they really hold your highest interest at heart, and they really are a recovering narcissist, someone recovering from narcissistic tendencies, which I said at the top of the show that I feel like I'm a person that has recovered from some narcissistic tendencies. And I will say is recovering, because you never know. I may discover some of them. I'll be like, dang, that is really messed up with me. I cannot believe I still do that. I need to stop that. Right? But a person who really is working on changing themselves and treating you better, they're not only going to acknowledge their behavior, they will apologize for that behavior. They will be specific about that behavior and invite you to tell them how it made you feel. That's a real acknowledgement. That's a real apology. If I was to say, Zena, I'm just using Zena for example, Zena, I am so sorry that I have been, let's go back to our example, the triangulation. I'm so sorry that I was, playing the middle between you and Elmira. I am so sorry that I said XYZ about you. And, my words caused Elmira to look at you differently. That was not, being a good friend to you. I'm so sorry. I will never do that again. And, if there, I invite you to tell me how that felt to you. I'm sure that was a horrible thing to do. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. That's a real apology. And of course, Dina, I'm just using this as the fake example. But that's a real apology, right? That's a real apology. I'm naming what I did. I'm being specific about what I did. I'm telling the truth about what I did. I'm apologizing, saying I'm sorry. I'm inviting you to tell me how, painful that was for you. I'm not asking you to just take the apology and shut up. Just go on and, I said I'm sorry. Dang, what you want from me? That's not real. Or even just I don't remember doing that, but if I did, then I'm sorry. That's not a real apology, right? So I'm just talking about ways to know if a person really is changing or if they just so happen to open up some more. Okay. Diggy Mo says you can't teach old dogs new tricks. No, an old dog has to be motivated for themselves to learn a new trick. Right? And I'm going into detail about this because narcissists are excellent at mimicking you, mimicking your behaviors, mimicking your words and your language, right? If you have experienced an opening, a spiritual awakening, for example, and you're now aware of, your chakra system, or, vibes and frequencies, that language is everywhere now. It's very trendy. And it's easy to learn how to appear to speak the language. Narcissists can be chameleons, big time, right? And they may use your newfound interest, your newfound joy, your newfound peace. They might try to use that against you and try to use that to blend in and be like, oh, yeah, I'm on the peace train too. I'm awakened too, right? But check the vibes. First of all, trust your gut. Trust your gut. Trust whatever your spirit is telling you. And in the case of your mother, it can be really difficult because you really want that relationship. It's natural to want that to be different than what it is if it's an unhealthy connection. Does that make sense? You can want it so bad. It can be just as toxic, if not more so, than like a toxic marriage, or toxic, romantic relationship. It's like, oh, I really want this dream so bad. I really want my happy ending. So I'm going to ignore this crappy behavior just so I can finally get my dream, right? And this is a dream you've held since you were a child. Oh, I really want my mother to love me. I really want my mother to like me. I really want us to have this wonderful relationship that I've seen other people have with their mothers, And I hate to tell y'all, but this is a lot more common than it is. Some people are faking. Some of these people doing all these posts on Mother's Day about my mother is my hero and blah, 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 blah. Faking. It's fake. And I hate to say it, but a lot of people are in denial and not being honest with themselves about how the relationship really is with their mother. And how we're talking earlier that it can oftentimes be difficult to find a safe space to talk about this issues in your relationships with your mother, because some of the people that will jump on you the worst and will confront you and tell you are just horrible for saying that, they are in denial themselves about the true nature of their relationship with their mother. Those are the ones that'll be the first to jump on you. Let's see what Amara's saying. Amara said, I had to learn to let go of my childhood dreams of that relationship and start fresh. Boom. Absolutely. 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 Because you could have a parent with narcissistic tendencies, and there may be a possibility of having a relationship with them. It's just not the one you were dreaming about. So you have to kind of like get realistic with yourself. Like, oh no, me and my mom is not about to, walk on the beach and hold hands and, walk off into the sunset like a Massengill commercial, right? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. We're not going to have this, perfect relationship. I have these heart-to-heart talks around the kitchen table like a Tampax commercial. It's not going to happen. But you can have some relationship with your mother, right? That don't mean you may not have to cut her off, And I'm mentioning cutoff because sometimes people are with severe narcissists. Unfortunately, sometimes, when they're very, very damaging, very antagonistic to you, sometimes the only way to deal with a narcissist is to disengage, to go no contact. And it's very unfortunate if that happens with your mom or any of your parents, any blood relative, but sometimes the relationship can be so unhealthy, so damaging, so detrimental to you. Sometimes that relationship can be one that just leaves you undone like no other. And you're not able to keep contact with them. Or you may have to go through a period of time of not having contact, right? But sometimes the answer is just to change the shape of that relationship by setting forth your boundaries and holding on to them. Okay? So, you guys, you can, if we have comments, if we have questions, now is the time. Okay? But I just want to be clear that being enlightened, being a healer, being a starseed, being a way shower, it's not always, gumdrops and rainbows type of situation. You still have to know how to defend yourself, how to protect yourself, and how to stand your ground. And sometimes you may have to correct someone and put them in their place. And there may be people that you have to disengage your relationship from. Okay. I see LA is up. I hope I'm saying that right. Blessings, and you're so right. Sis, my narcissist mother did a smear campaign on me before she died in 2020, in 2022. I'm sorry. Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. My mom did a smear campaign on me before she died in 2022, and my two brothers is distant towards me now. That happens, and we were talking about that. I don't know if you were in the chat. We were talking about, triangulation, playing siblings against each other. It's a way of holding control in the family and looking like, the good guy, and sometimes there's this thing with narcissists where there always has to be a good guy and a bad guy. And if you're the one that's been doing dirt behind the scenes and manipulating people, you're going to try to make sure that you're making those assignments, that you're painting the picture of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. But I'm so sorry that you experienced that. I know that's very, very hurtful, and sometimes these things, they can't be undone, but you can heal from them and try to move on and connect with your soul family, your frequency family. Sometimes the biological family is not where you end up finding your peace and finding your comfort and your support. Sometimes it'll be people who are just on the same frequency with you. So I'm praying for you that you will find your frequency family. Digamo said, oh, Myra, I just had to say goodbye to that relationship and just say hello every once in a while to save my sanity. Yes. Sometimes you do have to let go of that relationship, unfortunately, because if they're so damaging to you, they're so psychologically, emotionally damaging to you that you just can't have that person in your sphere. And the way to discover that is to set forth your boundaries. Because here's the thing with any abuser, okay, when they feel that they are losing control of their victim, losing control of their prey, right? Any predator losing control of their prey, they're going to become violent. They're going to become more dangerous. They're going to become, they're going to even more so lash out when you set forth your boundaries and say, look, you don't have to treat me like an adult. I'm not a child anymore. If you want to be in my life, this is how it has to be. That person may become very violent. They may become very upset, very antagonistic. Or depending on what type of narcissist you're dealing with, they may become very meek and mild and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was making you feel that way. And as soon as you leave, they get on the phone. Yeah, guess what they just, can you believe the nerve of them? They've always thought they were better than the rest of us. It happens. It's unfortunate, but it happens. But, unfortunately, when a narcissist has a baby, that doesn't cure them of becoming a narcissist, right? A lot of our parents were already narcissists long before we got here. And us coming onto the scene didn't change a thing, right? Diggy Mo says sometimes you have to make a tough decision to make a cutoff and love from a distance. So true. So true. If we don't have any questions, you all, any questions? Someone, I'm feeling like someone is saying, how do I know? How do I know when it's time to cut this off? It's time to cut it off when you put your boundaries out there and your boundaries are still being disrespected. It's time to cut it off when you realize that this is preventing you from forming, trusting, or being able to hold on to other relationships over a long period of time. When you realize that this injury is attracting other narcissists into your life, when you realize that this injury is preventing you from valuing yourself, you realize that when I come into this person's presence, I feel small. I start feeling small. I don't even feel like myself. I lose my voice when I'm around this person. Okay? When you set your boundaries out there, like, hey, if you want to be a part of my life, this is what I require. This is how I require to be treated. And that goes for anybody, right? It doesn't matter if it's mom, dad, brother, sister, friends, spouse. I require mutual respect, right? When you put that out there and it's not being respected, you have to draw some serious boundaries. You have to stick to what you have said. Okay? So that could mean going down to very little contact. Unfortunately, sometimes it has to be no contact. Because someone who is intent upon controlling you and damaging you, every time you come in contact with them, there's going to be some type of dig. And out of self-love, okay? Out of self-love. I'm not talking about no contact motivated by pure hatred, resentment, unforgiveness, and all that. No, be motivated by your love for yourself and your desire to feel peace in your heart. Your desire to feel valued with all of those you hold relationship with. Be motivated by your commitment to never betray yourself again. Allow that to motivate you. Okay? One last comment. It's time to go no contact when it starts to affect your health. Yes, that was my breaking point, unfortunately. Absolutely. Especially if you don't have a place to express this, to express your emotion in a safe place, it will start affecting your health. What goes unexpressed verbally, emotionally, will become expressed physically. Okay? So thank you all so much for all of your support. Oh my God, this has been wonderful connecting with you all. Thank you all for holding a safe space for me as I express this tonight, right? We all have to, be a safe place for each other and allow one another to speak our truths, right? Thank you for all the support and all the love in the chat. Thank y'all for coming on and being a part of this conversation tonight. We're here every night at 6:30 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night. Mwah, mwah. I love you all. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you all next week. Thank you. Peace.